Hi everyone, welcome to my new video in which we're gonna talk about React Router DOM and how to create two paths, one that can be accessed through if a user is logged in, and another one that can be accessed if the user is instead a generic user, for example, has to access our about page, our home page, or even the login page. So in here I simply have opened created a new project using npx, and the command used is npx create react app private route, and the template I'm using is TypeScript. And the next thing to do is npm install React Router DOM, and then we need to install also the types for React Router, which is at types React Router DOM. I've already installed both, so that the video is gonna go a little bit faster. So let's start and let's have a look, and we can see that the app is simply the normal one. Okay, so in here I created two empty files, one public private page, RC. This is my private page, and we're gonna do another functional component, which is a public page. This is a page accessible by anyone, and now should be possible to, let's restart the development. And there you go, now it's working. Our app.tsx, we don't need any of those things, so we can delete everything. We're gonna need browser router from React Router, and we're gonna use a switch and a route, a path private page component is equal to private page, and we're gonna have another route to public page component is public page. We're gonna have also root path generic, and the component is going to be we're going to create a new home component, so let's create home.tsx. Again, it's a functional component, and inside here we're gonna put a link to private page, public page, so now in app we're going to import our home. So we can access public page and public page, everyone can access. So what is the next bit to be done? The next bit to be done is to insert something that is going to simulate our login and logout functionality. So in here I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it fake auth.ts. Const fake auth is an object which is going to contain our credentials. So you're going to have a sign in, we're going to call set timeout, imagining that we are calling some server-side function. And same for sign out, we have a callback that has returned nothing, and that set timeout with the callback after 100 milliseconds. And now we export default fake auth. We should do that. Let's delete some of the files we don't need. And maybe we're going to create an auth page in which we're going to contain our logic for sign in and sign out. I don't need those. Just remove the index.css. Let's just remove this warning logo. Alright. That we moved and created our fake auth. The next thing we need to create, let me make the screen a little bit larger. So the next thing we need to create, it's a provider for our authentication status. So we're going to create a new use provider use auth provider.ts, and this is a function const use auth provider. We're going to define the types very soon. User set user, so we're gonna set the user initially to null because our user is not defined yet, it's locked out, so we don't know who the user is, or it can be a string. It can also be an object, of course, depending on our requirements. Then we're going to have a sign in, which takes a callback as before, that returns nothing. And what is going to return is going to call our fake user method that we opened, that we just created before. Is going to call this method and is going to have the callback pass through. The callback is what we're going to define now. So in the sign in, we're going to return, we don't actually have to return anything. We just have to do a fake auth dot sign in, and as a callback we provide a function in which we set our user to, for example, John Doe, and the same for a sign out. It's going to take a callback that returns nothing, where a fake auth dot sign out, and the callback is going to be with our set user is going to be set to null. And from this method we are going to return our user, our sign in method, and our sign out method. And of course we need to export default use of provider. Now for all those files we are going to what are we going to use? We're going to need a context to be used across all of those files. To use a context, we're gonna need well, we need to create exactly a context which is an auth provider. So we're gonna have an auth provider, and I have another video explaining what providers are in detail, and I suggest you to check it out. So we have an auth context, which is what we're going to share across the different items, which is a create context, initially of type null, and of course now I forgot in here that I need to provide an interface to be shared with this method. So export interface I'm going to call I use of provider, which has the methods sign in, then we have sign out and user. So what is the method? And this is of course some of type I use of provider. Sign in is a function that takes a callback, well, it takes a function that returns void and itself returns void. So we have our sign in, sign out, and user. Sign in takes a function that just returns void, and the overall function returns a void. Sign out is exactly the same as sign in, and user is a string. Well, actually it's a string, or it's a null. Going back to of provider, create context can be of type I use of provider or null. Now we are going to define the provider itself, which is of type React FC, and it's going to be an higher order component. So we're going to take the children that are passed to this component, and we are going to use our auth provider. Auth is equal to use of provider. We're going to return the auth context dot provider, and the value is going to be auth. Returning the children, and export default auth provider. Alright, So now we have our context and we have our auth provider. The next bit is going to be an use auth method that we need in order to share the current status that we defined in here. So this context, of course, needs to be shared across the components, and use auth is going to be a function that returns a use context from React of context. Let's see if okay, yeah, it's the correct one. Export default use auth. So we take the context that we create in here, which value is going to be passed through to every children that might need such value. And now we're gonna make use of it in our app.tsx, because we're going to take this provider in here and gonna wrap the entire app with it. So now we're gonna have auth provider that wrap the entire app. And now what are we able to do? Well, what we're now able to do is that anywhere in our app we are actually able to check the status of the user, if the user is logged in or if the user is logged out. So let's first of all check that everything still works like before. Public page, private page. Okay, so now we're gonna make a quick example. So we go back to our home page and we are going to take auth status const auth is equal to use auth. We have just defined in here. And now what we're gonna say, we're gonna check, let's just do a json.stringify auth.user, which in this case is going to be null because, well, we don't have a okay, the user is null. So now what we can do, we can add a login button. A login, and in here we're going to add const handle login. What is our handle login going to do? It's going to receive a click, and when the user clicks, we're going to say, well, we have a form of some sort, and we can say, well, our user made a login to our system, and we can say auth.signin callback, our callback function. We can do a push to logged in page. However, in this case, what we should see this value of .user to change to John Doe, because in our auth provider we said that when we sign in, we set the user to John Doe. So go back to here, login on click is equal to handle login. Click login, and our user is John Doe. Alrighty, now we want to demonstrate how we can modify the routes to have a route that works when the user is a public user and when the user it is a normal user. And we're going to do this really easily. We're going to define a new component, and this new component is going to be called private route. It's going to be a functional component as always. And what we're going to do, we're going to make use of auth. Const auth is equal to use auth, which is the same method we just used. And now we're gonna check if auth.user, if we have a user, is equal to null, means we are not logged in. We're going to return a redirect. See if you pick the correct React Router DOM. We're going to redirect the person to the home page. Otherwise, we're going to return the route component, which is going to take the parameters that were passed through the component. However, what we want to do here, we want to extend the interface so that all the properties that are on route are also available in REST, because this one it's only children. So if you're gonna put in the parent component 2 or other props, is not gonna work. So we have to extend the interface and take route props. Which is not extends root props. Alright, so now we should be able to actually use it correctly. So now our private page, we're going to go back to our app, and we're going to set this one is a private page, and here is complaining. That's exactly what I was talking about, that private page. Because of course it's not private page, it's private route. Okay, so if we now go back to our browser, we are logged in, public page can be accessed, private page can be accessed. However, if I now go to private content, I am redirected to this page, I can't see it. And this is my first demonstration for today. Thank you for watching. What we're going to see next, it is how we can set a header that is visible in all of the routes that are private, but not in the public ones. For example, we can log in into our app, and when we log in into the app, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is that we want to show a banner, so that's what I'm going to show you next. Thank you for watching. Bye.